So I've just had a tour of this outstanding plant with Sergio and Pat Walsh, your plant manager, and General Holyfield. Now that's a name right there. General Holyfield. Vice President of the UAW. Cynthia Holland, your local UAW president. And it was great to see the work that you're doing and the cars that you're building, especially when you consider the fact that just over a year ago, the future here seemed very much in doubt. Now, before I make my remarks, I've got to disclose, I'm a little biased here because the first new car that I ever bought was a Grand Cherokee. First new car. Up until that point, I had had some old beat-up used cars. You know, they were not state-of-the-art. And I still remember walking into that showroom and driving out with that new car. I had that new car smell, and everything worked. I wasn't used to that. Had all these, everything was electronic. You know, I'd had to roll up my windows up until that point. So I've got some good memories of that car. But I've got to tell you, when I sat in this car, this is a better car. This is a state-of-the-art car. This is a world-class car right here. Now, I want everybody to think about where we were. We were in the midst, when I took office, of a deep and painful recession that cost our economy about 8 million jobs. 8 million jobs. And took a terrible toll on communities like this one. Our economy was shrinking. About 6% per quarter. Now, this morning we learned that our economy grew by 2.4% in the second quarter of the year. So that means it's now been growing again for one full year. Our economy is growing again instead of shrinking. That's a welcome sign compared to where we were. But we've got to keep on increasing that rate of growth and keep adding jobs so we can keep moving forward. And that's especially important for places like this. In the 12 months before I took office, the American auto industry lost hundreds of thousands of jobs. Sales plunged 40%. Think about that. The industry looked like it was going over a cliff. And as the financial crisis and the vicious recession collided with an industry that for too long had avoided hard choices and hadn't fully adapted to changing times, we finally reached the point where two of the big three, Chrysler and GM, were on the brink of liquidation. And that left us with very few choices. One choice, one option, was to keep the practice of giving billions of dollars of taxpayer money to the auto industry, but not really forcing any accountability or change. So you just keep on kicking the tough problems down the road year after year, and hopefully seeing if you could get more and more money out of Washington. A second option was to do nothing and risk allowing two of the big three to disintegrate. And that could have meant the end of an industry that, like no other industry, represents so much of what makes up the American spirit. This industry has been the source of deep pride for generations of American workers, whose imaginations led to some of the finest cars the world has ever known, and whose sweat built a middle class that has held up the dreams of millions of our people. I just met one of your co-workers on a line He's third generation working at Chrysler. His grandfather worked at Chrysler. His father worked at Chrysler. Now he's on the line at Chrysler. And that could have all vanished. Now, the worst thing about it is that if we had done nothing, not only were your jobs gone, but supplier jobs were gone, and dealership jobs were gone, and the communities that depend on them would have been wiped out. And by the way, when you talk to the CEO of Ford, he'll tell you that that wouldn't have been good for Ford either, because a lot of those suppliers that they depend on might have gone out of business. Independent estimates suggest that more than 1 million jobs could have been lost if Chrysler and GM had liquidated. And in the middle of a deep recession, that would have been a brutal, irreversible shock. Not just to Detroit, not just to the Midwest, but to our entire economy. So I refused to let that happen. And we came up with a third way. What we said was, if you're willing to take the tough and painful steps necessary to make yourselves more competitive, if you're willing to pull together workers, management, suppliers, dealers, everybody, to remake yourself for changing times, then we'll stand by you and we'll invest in your future. Our strategy was to get this company and this industry back on its feet, taking a hands-off approach, saying, you guys know the business, we don't. We're going to give you a chance, but we do know you've got to change. Now, not surprisingly, a lot of folks were skeptical. You remember, last year, a lot of folks were saying, well, this is stupid, we shouldn't be helping them. And I understand that. Look, this was a hard decision. I didn't want government to get into the auto business. I've got enough to do. And the politics of it weren't good. You know, your delegation was supportive, but Debbie and Carl and Carolyn and others, they'll tell you, there are a lot of folks in Washington who said it couldn't be done. But I believed that if each of us were willing to work and sacrifice in the short term, workers, management, creditors, shareholders, retirees, communities, it could mark a new beginning for a great American industry. And if we could summon that sense of teamwork and common purpose, we could once again see the best cars in the world designed, engineered, forged, and built right here in Detroit, right here in the Midwest, right here in the United States of America. So I place that faith in you and all of America's auto workers. And you've vindicated that belief. The fact that we're standing in this magnificent factory today is a testament to the decisions we made and the sacrifices that you and countless stakeholders across this industry in this country were willing to make. So today, this industry is growing stronger. It's creating new jobs. It's manufacturing the fuel-efficient cars and trucks that will carry us toward an energy-independent future. You are proving the naysayers wrong. All of you. They thought it'd be impossible for your company to make the kind of changes necessary to restore fiscal discipline and move towards viability. Today, for the first time since 2004, all 3 U.S. automakers are operating at a profit. First time in 6 years. Last year, sales plummeted, and manufacturers and suppliers across the country were forced to idle plants and furlough workers. Today, Chrysler is responding to more demand than anticipated by keeping this plant and others running through the usual summer shutdown. And the same goes for GM's plants. Sales have rebounded.